The Vrieg were a name that echoed throughout the galaxy as a symbol of dominance, and fear their empire had stretched across star systems and worlds bowing before them, with few daring to challenge their might. Their technology was incomprehensible, their warriors ruthless, their empire vast and unyielding. From their distant star home, they looked upon Earth with disdain, an insignificant world populated by a species far too primitive to pose any real threat to their galactic supremacy. The Vrieg watched humanity from afar with amusement, believing that they were simply a fleeting curiosity barely worth the effort of conquest. It was a passing interest at best. They studied the humans' history, their wars, their politics, their technology, all from the comfort of their advanced ships, hidden in orbit far above the planet below. They chuckled at the thought of these monkeys ever standing a chance against them. They saw humans as little more than pests, just a stepping stone in their never-ending quest for conquest. Earth would fall with ease, they thought, as they began to plan their strike. The Vrieg decided to strike when humanity was at its most vulnerable. They had carefully observed the cycles of human conflict and unrest, the wars, the distrust, the constant squabbles over borders and resources. They knew humans were divided and fractured, and in their arrogance, they believed the fractured species would simply crumble under the might of their technology. Their first strike would be swift and overwhelming. They would cripple Earth's military infrastructure, destroy its defenses, and crush any hope of resistance. The invasion would be a simple affair for them, and by the time humanity realized what was happening, it would already be too late. The Vrieg descended upon Earth without warning, their ships appearing in the skies like dark omens, their weapons unleashed with terrifying force from orbit. They fired upon human cities, reducing them to rubble in mere moments. Millions of lives were snuffed out in the blink of an eye. Entire nations were shattered within hours. Earth's defense systems were crippled or obliterated as the Vrieg unleashed wave after wave of destruction. Humanity's greatest weapons were no match for the alien onslaught. Human military forces scrambled to respond, but they were no more than insects in the face of an empire that could level entire cities without breaking a sweat. The Vrieg warriors descended to the surface in their heavily armored dropships and engaged what was left of Earth's forces with brutal efficiency. They slaughtered human soldiers without mercy, crushing all resistance beneath their heels. But amidst the carnage and despair, something unexpected began to stir in the hearts of the survivors. There were whispers of defiance in the rubble of fallen cities, of survivors coming together to fight back against the invaders. It wasn't much at first, just a handful of humans, armed with nothing but their courage and determination. They were ordinary people, civilians who had never known battle before. But they had one thing the Vrieg hadn't anticipated: a relentless drive to survive, and a fury that would not be extinguished so easily. They began to fight back. Using the scraps of their broken world, they launched guerrilla strikes against the alien invaders, attacking Vrieg supply lines and sabotaging their technology. Wherever they could, the Vrieg generals scoffed at the puny efforts of these humans, thinking it a fleeting inconvenience. But what they didn't understand was that every time they struck down another human resistance fighter, it only sparked more to rise in their place. The humans were angry, and that anger was the spark that would set the galaxy on fire. The Vrieg didn't see it at first, the growing tide of resistance that surged beneath their notice. To them, humans were weak, fractured, and easily crushed. Their invincible ships hovered over shattered cities, their forces systematically wiping out pockets of survivors with overwhelming firepower. The Vrieg thought they were dealing with nothing more than desperate animals, scavenging the ruins of their once proud civilizations. What they didn't realize was that humans had something the Vrieg could never understand: the will to fight, no matter the odds. In the decimated streets of what was once New York, a handful of humans formed an unlikely alliance. Former soldiers, civilians, and even a few scientists who had been caught in the chaos came together under the leadership of Captain Elena Carter. Carter had been an officer in the United Nations peacekeeping forces before the invasion, and though she had never led a resistance movement before, she understood one thing very clearly: humans would never surrender. It was this understanding that allowed her to quickly organize the ragtag group of survivors, combining their strengths to launch hit-and-run strikes on Vrieg forces. They were scavengers, but they were survivors, and that made them formidable. As the Vrieg continued their destruction, they underestimated the ingenuity of humanity. Alina's group began using the rubble of fallen cities to create makeshift weapons and traps. They set ambushes for Vrieg patrols, using guerrilla tactics to keep the invaders on edge. Every successful attack, no matter how small, sent a ripple through the alien ranks. The Vrieg generals began to grow concerned, dismissing the humans' tactics as nothing more than inconvenience. But the frustration grew. Carter knew they had to do more than just harass the invaders. They needed to hit them where it hurt, and to do that, they needed to understand the alien technology they were up against. That's when they stumbled upon an unexpected opportunity. A Vrieg scout ship, damaged in a skirmish with a human resistance force, crashed in the outskirts of what used to be Chicago. The alien ship was disabled, but intact enough to offer some hope. The Vrieg would never expect a group of humans to study and reverse engineer their technology. The resistance, led by Carter and a group of engineers, descended upon the wreckage. The alien ship, with its sleek and unfamiliar design, posed a challenge, but humans were nothing if not resourceful. The team worked tirelessly, using their limited knowledge of alien tech to get a basic understanding of the ship's systems. As days turned into weeks, the humans made astonishing progress. They'd raid the ship's energy core to create makeshift weapons, cannibalized alien parts to create new armor for the resistance, and even learned how to pilot the ship. But it wasn't just the technology they were learning to control, it was the understanding of the Vrieg themselves. Alina and her team realized something the aliens hadn't. The Vrieg, despite their technological might, were overconfident, relying on their power to intimidate, but failing to understand the adaptability and resourcefulness of humans. It was this realization that led Alina to begin forming a plan that would send a message to the Vrieg. Humanity would not be crushed, no matter how many cities fell, no matter how many lives were lost. The Vrieg were about to learn the most important lesson of all. Humans, when pushed to their limit, didn't just fight. They adapted, and they fought smarter. And once they had tasted victory, they would never stop. The Vrieg underestimated the depth of humanity's resolve, and it began to show in ways they had never anticipated. The initial skirmishes, though small in the grand scheme of things, were beginning to add up. The once confident alien forces were now facing a problem they couldn't solve with brute force alone. Humans who refused to be defeated. The resistance, armed with repurposed Vrieg technology, became a persistent thorn in their side, a constant reminder that Earth's people were not the helpless creatures the Vrieg had believed them to be. Captain Alina Carter, having established herself as a tactical genius, understood the value of this moment. The Vrieg had expected to win in the first wave, but now they were bogged down in a long, drawn-out conflict, something they had not prepared for. And that gave humanity a chance. They weren't going to win by brute strength, but by taking advantage of the Vrieg's overconfidence, their arrogance. It was time to take the war to them, to shift the battlefield in ways the Vrieg would never anticipate. Alina's plan was simple, but it required precision and coordination. She had learned to exploit the weaknesses in the Vrieg's highly advanced communication network. With the help of the resistance engineers, she devised a plan to infiltrate their communication systems and plant a virus that would disrupt their command and control structure, creating confusion and chaos within their ranks. They would hit the Vrieg where it would hurt the most, at the heart of their military operations. But carrying out the plan wouldn't be easy. The Vrieg had set up heavily fortified command centers in the ruins of the world's major cities. These were not places the resistance could easily penetrate. So Alina's team began to rely on what they knew best: guerrilla tactics. They hit smaller, isolated targets first, drawing Vrieg forces away from the command centers. The resistance used the very environment the Vrieg had destroyed to their advantage: burned-out husks of skyscrapers, collapsed tunnels, and underground bunkers. They became ghosts in the ruined landscape, striking quickly and vanishing into the shadows before the Vrieg could retaliate. As the resistance ramped up their attacks, The Vrieg became more and more frustrated. Their once unbreakable lines began to fracture. Alien soldiers were found scattered, confused, and uncoordinated. The Vrieg were powerful, yes, but they relied on a rigid structure that was now being systematically dismantled. And at the center of it all was Elena's virus, which spread through the Vrieg's communication systems like wildfire, shutting down entire sectors and rendering their military leadership impotent. For the first time since the invasion began, the Vrieg were on the defensive. They no longer controlled the battlefield. Human soldiers, armed with alien technology, began striking at supply convoys, cutting off reinforcements, and sabotaging Vrieg weaponry. In one daring raid, the Resistance captured an alien warship, turning it against its former masters. This victory was a turning point. It wasn't just a battle won. It was a declaration that humanity was no longer a target waiting to be exterminated. They were a force to be reckoned with. But the Vrieg were not quick to admit defeat. They had underestimated humanity from the beginning, and now that mistake was becoming costly. Furious and humiliated, they called for reinforcements, calling upon every available resource within their empire to crush the rebellion once and for all. What they didn't realize was that every victory by the Resistance, every inch of ground reclaimed, only made the humans more determined. The Vrieg were about to discover that the more they tried to break humanity, the stronger humanity became. The spark of rebellion had ignited a fire, and the galaxy would soon feel the heat. The Vrieg could feel the pressure mounting, their once sure-footed dominance beginning to slip as humanity's resistance grew stronger. Every time they crushed a human cell or destroyed a human stronghold, two more would rise in its place, more resilient, more organized. What had begun as small, sporadic attacks had morphed into a full-fledged insurgency, and at the center of it all stood Elena Carter and her growing army of fighters. Ordinary humans armed with stolen alien technology, bound together by an unbreakable will to survive. The turning point had come when the Resistance successfully captured and reverse-engineered a Vrieg warship, a feat that had once seemed impossible. Elena's team had been working around the clock, studying every component of the ship they had brought back from their raid. It was a dangerous task, not only because the ship's alien systems were complex, but because the Vrieg would stop at nothing to reclaim their technology. The Resistance knew they had to act quickly. Carter, however, was already thinking ahead. She had witnessed firsthand how Vrieg warriors, though powerful, were not invincible. The Vrieg relied too heavily on their overwhelming firepower, thinking that sheer strength would intimidate humanity into submission. What they didn't know was that every attack they made only fueled the fire inside every human left alive on Earth. The more they tried to destroy, the more humanity adapted, and the more they fought back. The Vrieg had underestimated one thing: humanity's ability to improvise, to innovate, and to evolve in the face of impossible odds. With the warship in their possession, the Resistance now had a new tool to strike at the heart of the Vrieg Empire. Elena's team worked tirelessly to reprogram the ship's systems, learning how to operate its weapons and engines, tapping into its advanced technology in ways the Vrieg never intended. The first time, they successfully launched an attack on a Vrieg supply convoy with one of their own ships. It sent shockwaves throughout the alien ranks. They had never anticipated humans would be able to fight back in such a way, using their own weapons against them. But it was more than just technology that made the humans dangerous. It was their adaptability. With each encounter, the Resistance learned, adjusted, and grew more effective. They started to hit Vrieg convoys, then Vrieg outposts, using tactics that the aliens had never seen before. Their use of Vrieg technology was impressive, but it was the way they used it that truly confounded their enemies. Humans didn't just adapt to their weapons. They adapted to their strategies, learning to exploit weaknesses the Vrieg had thought were invulnerable. One of Elena's most trusted allies, a former engineer named Thomas, had come up with a brilliant tactic that used Vrieg anti-gravity technology to devastating effect. The plan was simple: disable a small Vrieg fleet by attacking their gravitation anchors. By turning their own technology against them, humans were able to render the fleet immobilized. What followed was an ambush of Vrieg ships, caught off guard and unable to retaliate. It was a flawless victory that left the invaders stunned. But the war wasn't over. While the resistance celebrated their victories, the Vrieg generals grew more desperate. Their commanders had underestimated humanity's ingenuity, and now, even with their overwhelming technological superiority, they were on the defensive. The Vrieg had expected to conquer Earth within weeks, not face a prolonged war that seemed to drag on with no end in sight. Alina knew that this was just the beginning. The tide had turned, and the Vrieg's grip on Earth was slipping. But the aliens weren't done yet. They would escalate their efforts, grow more ruthless. But humanity, now more united than ever, was ready for whatever came next. The resistance was not only surviving, they were becoming a force to be reckoned with, and that was something the Vrieg would soon regret. The real war was only just beginning. The Vrieg had underestimated the power of human resilience, and now they were paying the price. What had started as a brief invasion to quash humanity had turned into a brutal, ongoing war, one that was slowly but surely draining the Vrieg's resources and patience. The resistance, once disorganized and desperate, had transformed into a formidable fighting force, and the tide was shifting. With every battle they won, every Vrieg outpost they dismantled, the humans gained more ground. But the aliens weren't about to give up easily. Their pride had been wounded, and they would stop at nothing to destroy the humans who dared to challenge their supremacy. As the weeks passed, the Vrieg generals grew increasingly paranoid. They called upon every resource at their disposal, reinforcing their positions and fortifying their cities. Earth's largest cities were now under constant siege, with Vrieg forces swarming every available stronghold. The Vrieg response to human resilience was simple: escalate the destruction. They began targeting civilian centers, not just to crush resistance, but to break humanity's spirit. The strategy was calculated. By eliminating entire cities, the Vrieg believed they could sow fear and panic, forcing humanity to surrender in the face of overwhelming loss. However, what the Vrieg had failed to understand was that the more they destroyed, the more they cemented their own downfall. Each attack on human civilization only made the resistance fight harder. It was in the rubble of fallen cities that the human spirit truly ignited, not only for revenge, but for something greater: the desire to take back their home, to protect their future, and to prove that no empire could extinguish their will. At the heart of the resistance was Captain Alina Carter, whose leadership had kept the insurgents unified even in the darkest of times. But the battles were wearing on her, and she knew they couldn't keep fighting forever with hit-and-run tactics. They needed something more, something that would deliver a decisive blow to the Vrieg. Alina's mind was already working, already strategizing the next step. She knew the Vrieg's weakness wasn't just their technology. Though their superiority in that area was significant, it was their arrogance. They thought themselves invincible, invulnerable, but every piece of Vrieg tech they had stolen, every captured ship, every alien weapon they had repurposed, made the resistance stronger. But now, they needed something that would really hit the Vrieg where it hurt. The breakthrough came when Thomas, the engineer who had been instrumental in adapting alien technology for human use, uncovered something buried deep within the Vrieg's military command. It was a secret weapon, a massive fleet of warships, heavily armed, and stationed just beyond Earth's atmosphere, waiting to be deployed in the final phase of the invasion. The Vrieg were preparing to wipe out the last pockets of resistance with a full-scale orbital bombardment, an assault that would leave no survivors. This was their last gamble, the Vrieg's final attempt to crush humanity once and for all. And Alina Carter knew they couldn't let it happen. With the information in hand, Alina began assembling a strike team. This mission would be different from any they had undertaken before. It would require precision, stealth, and above all, speed. They had to get close enough to sabotage the Vrieg's fleet before it could launch. It was a dangerous mission, a 1 in 1,000 chance of success. But if they succeeded, it could turn the entire war in their favor. As the Resistance prepared for this high-stakes mission, Alina looked at her team, her soldiers, her engineers, her scientists, and her friends. They had all lost so much. They had all endured horrors unimaginable to anyone who had not lived through the Vrieg's invasion. But they had also grown stronger, more united. They had proven time and time again that no matter how powerful the enemy, humanity would not go down without a fight. And now, they had a chance to strike a blow that would not only cripple the Vrieg, but leave them with a clear message. Earth would never fall. The humans were coming, and this time, they weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. As the final battle loomed, tension rippled through the ranks of the Resistance. The plan was audacious, perhaps the most dangerous mission they had ever undertaken. To infiltrate the Vrieg's heavily fortified orbital fleet, sabotage their command systems, and cripple their ability to launch a planet-wide bombardment, all within a narrow window of time. Alina Carter had never been more certain of the stakes, but as she looked out over the group of soldiers, engineers, and techs who had gathered to carry out the mission, she saw the same fire in their eyes that had ignited the Resistance from the very beginning. These were the same men and women who had fought through impossible odds, who had stood their ground when it seemed the world was falling apart. They had become more than just survivors. They had become warriors. The mission to sabotage the Vrieg fleet would begin with a daring infiltration of their orbital command center. The fleet, stationed just outside Earth's atmosphere, was the Vrieg's final trump card. They had kept it hidden in plain sight, cloaked behind layers of security and encryption. It was the last phase of their invasion plan, a weapon that, once activated, would deliver a devastating barrage to the planet below, wiping out any remaining human resistance. Alina knew that if they didn't act quickly, the war could be lost. The very survival of Earth depended on this strike. The plan was simple on paper, but fraught with dangers. A small team, led by Alina, would board a stolen Vrieg warship that had been adapted for human use. They would make their way to the orbital fleet, using the ship's cloaking technology to slip past the Vrieg's outer defenses. Once inside, they would sabotage the fleet's command hub, disabling the systems that controlled the weapons and rendering the fleet useless. The team was small, only a handful of soldiers and engineers, each one handpicked for their unique skills. Thomas, the lead engineer, had spent countless hours studying the inner workings of the Vrieg ships, ensuring they could exploit every vulnerability. He was confident in their ability to bypass the Vrieg's security measures, but even with his expertise, the risk was monumental. The fleet was heavily guarded, and the Vrieg had placed an immense amount of pressure on the command center's security. As the strike team prepared for their departure, Alina pulled them together for a final briefing. "We're going to make history today," she said, her voice steady, resolute. "This is the moment we show the Vrieg who they're dealing with. We've learned from them. We've adapted. Now it's time to make sure they understand just how far we'll go to protect our home. We don't stop until this mission is complete. We don't let anything get in our way." Her words were met with grim nods, their faces a mixture of determination and something deeper, something harder to define. These were no longer just soldiers. They were warriors with something to fight for. Their families, their planet, their future. The launch was imminent. Alina watched as the team boarded the warship, their faces set in stone, their resolve unshaken. She took a moment to look out at Earth, the blue and green marble hanging in the void. This was their home. This was their fight. They would not let it fall. As the warship lifted off, the team settled into their stations, and the ship's cloaking system powered up, making them invisible to the Vrieg fleet's radar. The hours that followed were tense, filled with the quiet hum of machinery and the occasional sound of static over their comms. The Vrieg's massive fleet loomed ahead, a reminder of the overwhelming force they were about to face. The closer they got, the more Alina could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. They were about to step into the lion's den, into the heart of the enemy's final bastion. If they failed, Earth would be lost. But if they succeeded, it would be a blow to the Vree that they might never recover from. As the team neared the orbital fleet's command center, Elena's voice broke through the silence. Stay focused. Stay sharp. This is the moment we've been fighting for. We go in, we take out their command center, and we get out. No second chances. The warship continued its silent approach, the stars stretching ahead as humanity's last hope for survival prepared to strike at the very heart of the Vree's might. The warship glided silently through the void, its cloaking field keeping it invisible to the Vree fleet above. Elena Carter and her strike team sat in tense silence, hearts pounding as they approached the heart of the Vree's orbital command center. The command deck hummed with the low whir of machinery, the only sounds the quiet exchanges between the team members as they ran final checks on their equipment. The Vree's fleet, an imposing array of warships and assault crafts, loomed just ahead. If their mission succeeded, it would cripple the invaders' ability to destroy Earth. If they failed, there would be no coming back. Elena glanced around at the faces of her team, all steely-eyed with determination. They knew the stakes. They were well past the point of mere survival. This wasn't just about saving themselves anymore. This was about sending the Vree a message. Earth would not fall, no matter how great the odds. The mission had to succeed. As the warship moved closer to the Vree's orbital command hub, the team's primary objective became clearer: disable the control systems that governed the fleet's weaponry. It was a sophisticated network of AI-driven defenses and weapons, a system so advanced that even the Vree had never expected anyone, let alone humans, to breach it. Elena's pulse quickened as the ship passed through the outer defensive rings, but their cloaking technology was holding, keeping them undetected. She felt the weight of every second ticking away. The warship's AI relayed a warning through the comms. Hostile signatures detected. Fleet moving to intercept. Elena cursed under her breath. We don't have much time. Get to your stations. Now. The mission had just become more dangerous. The Vree sensors had picked up an anomaly, and the fleet was scrambling to track them down. They were about to become the hunted. Elena's mind raced as the ship surged forward, moving faster than its alien counterpart ever could have, thanks to the modifications the Resistance had made. She reached for the comms and issued orders. We break in, disable their weapons, and take out the command center. Focus on the primary power grid. If we cut their energy supply, their fleet goes dead. We'll have a small window before they realize what's happened. Thomas, the Resistance engineer, spoke up from the lower decks, his voice crackling with urgency. I've got the control node. It's down. Just need a few more seconds to bypass their security protocols. The seconds felt like hours. Elena held her breath, praying that the Vree hadn't yet realized they had infiltrated their fortress. They needed those few precious moments to execute their plan. The stakes couldn't be higher. Then the alarms went off. Red lights flashed across the warship's cockpit as enemy ships locked onto them. The Vree were no longer just aware of their presence. They were closing in, fast. Time's up, Elena muttered under her breath. Brace for impact. The warship shuddered as enemy fire tore through the space around them, close enough to rattle the hull. Elena's fingers flew over the control console as she executed evasive maneuvers, narrowly avoiding a blast that would have torn them apart. They were in the heart of the Vree's fleet now, and all they could do was rely on their wits and the advanced technology they'd stolen. The ship lurched again, and Elena felt the gravity of their situation closing in. Energy core destabilizing, Thomas warned. I need 5 more seconds, Carter. Just 5. Elena clenched her jaw, barely able to hear her own thoughts over the cacophony of alarms and weapons fire. The team was fighting for survival. No one would make it out if they didn't succeed in this one last task. As the enemy closed in, Elena watched the countdown in her mind tick down toward their final opportunity. One wrong move, and they would all be dead. 3 seconds, Thomas called. Elena's breath hitched as she locked eyes with the rest of the team. They had come this far. They had fought too hard to lose now. Then, the message came through the comms. Power systems are down. Vree fleet weapons offline. A chorus of triumphant cheers broke out on the comms, but there was no time for celebration. Alina's voice cut through the euphoria. Mission's not over yet. We've got one shot to get out. Everyone, hold tight. The Vree fleet had been crippled, but now the real test began. They had to escape before the enemy realized they'd been sabotaged and sent their full forces after them. The team could only hope they had done enough damage to slow the Vree long enough for them to slip away unnoticed. The Vree fleet, now disarmed and disoriented, was in chaos. Their once impenetrable weapons systems were down, their command center in disarray, and the human warship that had infiltrated their stronghold was slipping through the cracks of their vast empire. But the clock was ticking, and Alina Carter knew that their window of opportunity was rapidly closing. The Vree would not remain unaware of the sabotage for long. They would adapt, and when they did, the consequences would be devastating for the humans on board. Alina's hands moved deftly across the warship's controls, guiding the vessel through a narrow gap between two massive Vree ships. The tension was palpable. Every second felt like an eternity as the Vree desperately tried to regroup. She knew they had to break free before reinforcements arrived. Or worse, before the Vree realized the damage was irreversible and made a retaliatory strike that would wipe them out. "Can you get us out of this, Thomas?" Alina asked, her voice calm but laced with urgency. Thomas's voice crackled through the comms. "I'm rerouting power to the engines, but we're running out of time. The Vree are already scrambling their fighters." "Don't let them catch us," Alina replied tersely. She felt the warship shake again as Vree pursuit ships locked onto them, firing their remaining weapons. It was a constant barrage, but for now, the shields held. The ship was on the move, cutting through the formation of Vree warships, each second spent closer to the final phase of the plan. 3 minutes until full power is restored, Thomas added. "We're not out yet, but we got a fighting chance." A fighting chance. That was all they needed. The words seemed almost hollow in the face of the peril they were facing, but Alina clung to them. The mission had to succeed. It would succeed. She couldn't afford to think otherwise. Not now, when Earth's future hung in the balance. The pursuit grew more intense as the Vree fighters swarmed toward them, and Alina barked orders to the crew. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Keep our cloaking systems active as long as possible, but don't rely on them. If they figure out our position, we're dead in the water. Let's move, people." Her team moved with precision, a well-oiled machine forged in the fires of this war. The warship's cloaking field flickered but held, allowing them to weave through the enemy ships, staying just out of their weapons' range. Alina's heart raced, and for a moment, she let herself feel the weight of everything they had sacrificed. The losses, the friends they had left behind, the families who had placed their hope in this very mission. With a final, desperate push, Thomas's voice broke through the tension again. "Engines online. We've got full power, Alina. Get us out of here." Alina's fingers flew over the controls as she engaged the warship's final escape vector. She pulled them into a steep dive, sending the ship hurtling toward a nearby asteroid belt, the chaotic debris field offering a brief moment of cover. The Vree ships, now unable to track them with any accuracy, began to scatter in confusion, and Alina guided their ship into the protective shadows of the asteroid field. The warship plunged deeper, the immense rocks all around them providing a natural shield against any further tracking attempts. For a few brief moments, everything was silent. They had done it. The Vree fleet, for now, was left behind, crippled, vulnerable, and unaware of the true scale of the sabotage they had just endured. Alina leaned back in her chair, exhaling deeply, her body aching from the strain of the mission. They had pulled it off. Against all odds, they had struck a blow to the Vree that would echo across the galaxy. It was a victory, but there was no time to rest. Not yet. "We're not out of the woods," Alina said, her voice steady but grim. "We'll have to make our way back to Earth, fast, and rally the others. The Vree are going to regroup, but now we have the advantage. We know how they think, and we know how to fight back." She glanced around at her team. They were exhausted, battered, but they were alive. They had made it, and they would keep fighting until the Vree realized the cost of underestimating humanity. Earth was not a dying world. It was a world that had only just begun to fight back. The resistance was no longer just surviving. They were winning, and the Vree would regret ever setting foot on Earth.